Hi, I'm Dan Lagani with Silver Solutions, the senior-focused home services company. Over the past year on AgeWise, we've had a range of fascinating conversations. We've spoken to Super Bowl winning head coaches, industry experts across things like Alzheimer's, and a range of other topics, and we've also spoken to the parents of celebrities and Grammy Award-winning musicians. Today, we speak to a first-time author. Someone who shows that no matter what age you are, you can continue to do and learn new things. We're speaking with Helen Pratt. Helen's got a fascinating story of a dinner with Eleanor Roosevelt some 60 years ago, and her newly released book, Dinner with Eleanor, is our topic. Helen, thanks so much for joining us today on AgeWise.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we want to cover so many different parts of this, including, Helen, why now? Why write this book that captures a momentous event in your life back from the early 1960s? But first, I want to start with something that I think really ties all of this so nicely together with so many other American stories. This really is an American tale, and it starts out with you as the granddaughter of immigrants. So talk about how your family got to America, where they came from, where they located, because it sets such a wonderful stage for the dinner that you ultimately had with Eleanor Roosevelt.
Well, to begin with, I was very close to my grandmother, who came to the United States in 1910. So that was a number of years ago. And I got very close to her and that was the way I learned to speak Yiddish, which was her native language. She came from a country called Georgia, and Georgia had a number of Jews who left their home country and came to the United States to seek their fortune, and really to avoid pogroms and difficulties that were happening in their country. It wasn't a safe place for Jewish people.
I'm guessing that just based on the timeline in the book, that you were doing your graduate degree at the University of Pennsylvania in the late 50s and early 1960s. Is that correct?
Yes, from 60 to 64.
What's interesting about that is that that's a time where not a lot of women were actually going to four-year colleges, let alone going on to Ivy League schools for graduate level degrees. Where do you think the interest and importance in education came from? Where in your family?
My interest came from my father's family, and from my mother's family came my artistic inspiration from my grandmother. But from my father's family, education was an absolute requirement. Playing a musical instrument was another requirement. And all of them put together made for a very interesting life for anyone who shared these tasks.
So it's the 1960s. You're studying for your master's in archaeological architecture at an Ivy League school, already setting you up in a way that's different than many other of your contemporaries during the day. And in one of those classes, you meet someone by the name of Roger, who went by the nickname Mickey, that ultimately became your husband.
I met Mickey, who was a fellow student in the architecture class with me. And I met him because he was in the studio with me, and he turned out to be from a family very much interested in education as well, the Pratt family, but it also turned out to be a member of a family that had joined with Rockefeller and had become the family of Pratt Institute, and had become the family of Standard Oil, which is what his family was participated in. They were the founders of Standard Oil, and that was connected with Rockefeller. I knew nothing of this. He was my fellow classmate. We were just architecture students in the graduate program at Penn, which was a new program. And G. Holmes Perkins had founded it, and we were all 42 of us. They were all men and me, and I was there. And he's the only woman in my class, and it turned out to be the great educational experience of my life.
At what point in the process does Mickey become more than just somebody that's a classmate, but somebody that you're now involved with and ultimately engaged to?
Well, I got to know him through my work in school, but we became a couple very quickly. We became a couple in about we said 10 days. After 10 days, he proposed marriage to me, which is a shocking thing. I never would have expected something like that, but he did, and I said yes. I knew nothing about his background, but he was very handsome.
It must have been prior to the arranged dinner and interview with Eleanor Roosevelt. Did you start to understand the family that you had just agreed to marry into? When did that become clear to you?
Before the wedding, we had a dinner arrangement that that Mickey's mother set up between Eleanor Roosevelt and Mickey and me. So I didn't know that it was an interview and that I was being interviewed to see if I was an appropriate addition to the family, but that's what it turned out to be. She checked me out to see if I was appropriate to join this family, which was the Pratt family, which I was beginning to find out, and not just at that moment. It took me a while to figure it out, but it took me some time to figure that if I was being invited by Eleanor Roosevelt for dinner, it wasn't because I came from Freehold, New Jersey, but it was because I was going to become an integral part of another family, but an important family in terms of the history of our country.
At any point during this conversation, were you struck by the fact that just 2 generations earlier, here are your grandparents emigrating from Eastern Europe into the United States? Now, within that fairly short period of time, you've gone on to college, to graduate school at an Ivy League school, and now you're meeting with a former First Lady who was in the White House for 12 years with her husband, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and you're essentially being interviewed to become a new member of that family. Did that strike you at any point along the way as extraordinary?
Well, it struck me gradually. It didn't, and the whole occasion was unusual in my mind. I mean, why was I there? Except I thought it was because I was going to marry Mickey, and his mother was a very close friend of Eleanor Roosevelt.
And what was it all these years later? I think you started writing this book back in 2018. It was just released in July of 2021. But now, some 60 years later almost, what prompted you to capture it all in writing and publish the story now?
Well, I thought that if I published the story now, I wouldn't hurt anybody's feelings. They all have passed away that were attending the dinner. Eleanor, Mickey, and I, of course, hadn't, but I was the one who was witness, so I could describe the whole event and do a pretty clear job on what happened.
Talk about your family. You have 4 children, so you've succeeded not only in that dinner, but clearly in many other parts of your life. What is the family makeup today?
Well, I have 2 children myself. Mickey and I have 2 children. Mickey passed away a few years ago, but I have Suzanne uh, Pratt Davis, who has 3 sons, and I have Elizabeth, who has 2 daughters, and one of them just came in number 4 in the Junior Olympics in a race. So that's what's going on. I have an athlete, and I have an architect, and I have a freshman in college, and I have the whole thing that you would hope for from your grandchildren. I have that.
Where do you live today, and have you downsized from the home that you raised your daughters in, or are you still in the same home?
Yes, you have to downsize, and yes, you have to move if necessary, and that was something I had to do. And fortunately, my husband, my second husband, whom I should have mentioned, he's very important in my life, Eli Pritzker. He eventually moved here to this apartment as well, and it was a very good arrangement for us, being on one level, level. And he, of course, is no longer with us, but he lived to the age of 93, which is pretty terrific.
What else do you wish that you'd learned earlier in life that you could share with us now that may help guide others like myself, who has an older mom, that could be useful or, again, just interesting?
I remember that I didn't ask her the questions that I would have asked at an older age, not when I was 23 years old. At an older age, I would have asked her, why didn't FDR bomb the railroad tracks leading to Auschwitz? Why was that permitted to happen? Why did the Holocaust take place? Why didn't FDR try to put an end to this terrible destruction of people in the effort to just wipe out a total number of people just because they were Jewish? And I would have asked that now at an older age, but at 23, I didn't know what to ask. I just stayed quiet.
I want to end on something much lighter. You make a comment in the book about the dinner itself. And did I get this correctly? You think she served you dinner on plates that had come from the White House back in the mid-1940s. Is that right?
Well, I only knew that I didn't know where the plates came from, but the set she had at the White House was a huge set, and it was Lenox China from my understanding. And I don't know whether she would have taken any with her, which was much earlier, and by accident. So as far as I'm concerned, I could have eaten on paper plates. I was just so fascinated to be there.
Helen Pratt, author of the new book, Dinner with Eleanor, thanks so much for taking time today with us on AgeWise to tell your story. If you like this episode of AgeWise, please share it with a friend and spread the word about the new book, Dinner with Eleanor. And if you'd like to see other episodes of AgeWise, you can visit our website, silversolutions.com, and click on the video tab and find all of the backstories. For all of us here at Silver Solutions that work harder every day to make growing older safer, easier, and more rewarding for the whole family, I'm Dan Lagani. Until next time, stay safe and be wise.